So recently I had a family reach out. They're looking to move to the Orlando area next year, and two areas they're heavily considering are Winter Park and Dr. Phillips. And so we dove through the similarities, the differences in all facets, and seeing how it helped them, I figured I'd make a video to help you as well if you're considering the same. And so the first category that we're going to kind of talk about is location. To Winter Park, you're about 30 minutes to the airport, 15 minutes to downtown Orlando, and about 35 minutes, give or take, to Disney, which is not bad, right? But then there's Dr. Phillips, where you're 12 minutes to Disney, about 20 minutes to downtown Orlando, and another 20 minutes to the airport. So just in regards to proximity to the areas that a lot of people care about when it comes to Orlando, Dr. Phillips wins every single time. It's a really good centrally located location. I feel like that felt weird to say. However, I will say from my experience and opinion somewhat is that driving around day to day in the immediate areas are somewhat different. So for example, in Dr. Phillips, you really have a few main thoroughways that you're going to be driving on 90% of the time. So you got south of Popka Vineland, Sand Mine Road, Turkey Lake Road. At peak hours, it can be a logistical nightmare because a lot of bottlenecking happens. So a lot of people are coming off of I-4 or they're either going onto I-4, and there's only a few roads in Dr. Phillips currently to support that. They do have future improvements coming, and I'll touch on that in the last category, so stick to the end of the video. But from someone who had their real estate office there for the better part of 2 years, I was very selective in when I went to the office and when I left, because I certainly didn't want to get caught up in that traffic. Whereas in Winter Park, there's a bunch of little roads that you can get on and off of. God forbid if an accident happens, for example, you're not completely cut off from getting to another part of Orlando for the day. All being equal though, Dr. Phillips does kind of take the cake when it comes to proximity here in Orlando. So the second thing the family that reached out cared about, and I think you might as well, are schools. And now I can't necessarily talk about this much as a real estate agent. I can't say whether it's good or bad, but according to the Florida Department of Education, which by the way is where I suggest you start your search before going to niche.com or greatschools.org or looking it up on Zillow, where they have the number rating, because we actually go by letter ratings here in Florida. In Dr. Phillips, it's a mixture of A, B, and C schools, with a lot of the A-rated schools being elementary, and in Winter Park, it is a sole mixture of A and B schools. Now, what I will say is I don't have kids, and so I can only refer to a lot of my clients who have young kids especially, but just have kids nonetheless, and is that don't stop your search at just looking at the letter. Call the schools, ask questions. If you're here on a trip, time block to go out to the schools in person, talk to the administrators, ask questions then. Just because it's an A-rated or B-rated school doesn't necessarily mean that it is best suited for your child or children's needs, or so I've been told. So make sure to do your diligent research on that, but just on the basis of the average of grades in the area, Winter Park wins out in terms of schools. Third category, retail. Now this is a tough one because both are really good in this department, I will say. So in regards to the fun things to do in Dr. Phillips, a lot of it actually kind of revolves around the food scene, because they have what is known as Restaurant Row here in Orlando, which is over 100 different restaurants from fast casual to fine dining. And so it's a really great time. A lot of people from all different parts of Orlando come to Dr. Phillips to hang out, eat some really good food, and just have a good time. For my golfer friends out there, you're probably familiar with Arnold Palmer, and so you'll know that the Arnold Palmer Invitational is actually held in Dr. Phillips at the Bay Hill Golf Course. So you have some really nice golfing opportunities. You also got the golf course over in the community of Orange Tree. You got the Dr. Phillips Community Park, which is also a really great amenity just for the residents in the area. Then you also have just the niche stuff, the cigar lounges, the private social clubs like London House. And I think it does have a more upper echelon, mature audience when it comes to the type of offerings that are in Dr. Phillips. And that certainly carries over into Winter Park as well. When it comes to the food scene in Winter Park, one, it's immaculate. What I always like to say is that a Michelin guide recently came to Orlando for, the first time ever. And so majority of the restaurants that received a Michelin star, guess where they're located? In Winter Park. So I certainly think they went out on the elevated dining experience. You do have golfing opportunities as well. Spend a quick 2 hours at the Winter Park 9, or you can go over to the Winter Park Pines golf course. So you're covered there. Got a lot of boutiques in Winter Park, which is not necessarily as common over in Dr. Phillips. Keep in mind the outlets and the malls are fairly about 15 minutes, both from either location. And so you're covered there in general, but Winter Park has more of that kind of like boutique, small pop mom and pop vibe. There you also got the farmer's market, which is really great. A lot of people love that. And it's a great way to meet locals if you're considering moving to either area. This is actually one of the few videos where it makes sense for me to mention this, but in terms of grocers, especially for my folks on the West Coast, we have Trader Joe's in both locations. We also have Whole Foods in both locations, along with the typical Florida grocers like your Publix and that kind of thing. We do not have an Erewhon, and if we were to have one, it would most likely be in Winter Park. But I think in totality, Winter Park certainly wins out, and that's no shame to Dr. Phillips. I think it's probably the only area Dr. Phillips could lose to, because Winter Park is fairly unbeatable. Now, after all, the family did reach out to me for their real estate needs, so it'd be a shame if I did not touch on real estate. So the average price looking over the past year in Dr. Phillips, combining the two zip codes, was right around $738,000, whereas in Winter Park, the average price was right around $779,000. Now, what I don't want to do, which is what I told them, is give you a false sense of reality when it comes to the prices in these areas. Because if you actually delineate the zip codes in Winter Park, where you're looking at specifically the 32789 zip code, which changes school zoning, proximity to the areas that we talked about, the average price now bumps up to just over $1.2 million for that zip code. So 32792 happens to be more affordable, which kind of drags down that average price. Over in Dr. Phillips, kind of the same thing. If you take the zip code that houses Golden Oak, that's 32836, average price bumps up to over $1 million as well, just around $1,040,000. So still more affordable than Winter Park's 32789, but certainly more than what you might expect just given the average numbers combining the two zip codes. And so that is something to look out for. But all in all, Dr. Phillips is certainly more affordable. Both areas kind of have a similar profile in regards to the real estate that they offer. Not a ton of new construction, although Dr. Phillips wins in this category because you do have Pulte with their pretty much the last community that's new construction in there, which is Parkview Reserve. New construction happens in Winter Park as well. It's just that it's custom, it's not production builders. And so although a lot of it is the $3, $5, $7, $10 million price point, you do have some that are just over that average price point for the 32789 zip, right around 1.2, 1.4. Below that, you're looking at a resale more than likely, but a really cute resale. It's not the cookie cutter homes that a lot of people associate Orlando with, but both areas have really amazing real estate. But in terms of affordability, Dr. Phillips wins out by default. Now, I know you're growth minded, so you're probably curious about the future of both areas. And so let's touch on Dr. Phillips first, because in the middle of the video, I talked about some road improvements coming their way. And there's really three major ones. It's adding an off and on ramp right around the Turkey Lake Sand Lake Road area, another to South Apopka Vineland, and another to Darrell Carter Parkway, really alleviating the amount of pressure that goes through these so few roadways for the amount of people that are both moving here and living here currently. Over in Winter Park, there isn't a lot of land left to build a lot of big things. And so a lot of the work that's being done there are redevelopment and revitalization. So for example, the Winter Park Village got a complete makeover of the facade. It looks absolutely amazing now and more in fitting with the high-end vibe that they were going for. It's not the place you go to see a lot of like growth in the future. Winter Park is a very stable area, which is why I think there's a high concentration of luxury homes there. So whether or not you're looking at Winter Park or Dr. Phillips, I want to be the real estate agent that helps you buy that home there. So feel free to reach out, info@orlandowithmario.com. Take care.